A boy stands on the edge of the Judean desert, the limestone burning white against the soles of his leather sandals. But if you step into the actual dirt of Judea, if you look at the ancient Hebrew words David put on the parchment, the staff is a walking stick, a long, slender branch, a tool for guiding a wandering sheep, or a hook to pull them back from a jagged ledge. A shadow drops from the limestone cliffs. A wolf lunges from the caves. The flock panics. They press together in the dust. The air is suddenly thick with the smell of wet wool and panic. They have no claws. They have no fangs. They have no armor. They cannot fight back. The shepherd does not run. He steps forward. He plants his leather sandals in the dirt. He draws the oak club. He swings in the dark. Wood connects with bone. The predator yelps. The threat retreats into the shadows. The shepherd stands squarely between the trembling flock and the teeth in the dark. David writes, "Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." We have completely domesticated the word comfort. We think of a warm blanket. We think of a soothing voice. We think of a cup of tea on a rainy afternoon. We think of safety. But in the deep ravine, comfort looks entirely different. The comfort is not a soft pillow. It is a heavy weapon swung on your behalf. The sheep are comforted because the man leading them is lethal to the things trying to kill them. The landscape changes completely. The 23rd Psalm is not a lullaby for the dying. It is a field manual for the living. They breathe a sigh of relief when they see the rod pulled from the belt. True peace is not the absence of predators in the canyon. It is the presence of a protector who knows exactly how to fight. He guides with the staff. He guards with the rod. They survive the Tzalmavet. They make it through the narrow gorge. They climb the final rocky incline. The canyon finally opens up. The blinding blue sky returns. They step out onto the high summer plateau, the destination they have been marching toward for days. But what they find waiting for them on the high ridge is a scene that breaks every rule of ancient desert hospitality. The poetry shifts abruptly. David puts down the wooden staff and raises the curtain on an entirely different cultural scene. The shepherd becomes a Bedouin host. Psalm chapter 23, verse 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. When a modern Western reader hears the word table, we picture a mahogany dining room set. We picture a polite dinner party. But in the ancient Near East, the law of desert hospitality was a fierce matter of life and death. If a traveler was being hunted by assassins, and he managed to cross the threshold into the tent of a local sheikh, the real question of this poem isn't, how do I face the end? It's this, how do you survive a space designed to break you? The moment he was invited inside and offered food, the rules of engagement completely changed. Eating together in the ancient world was not just caloric intake, it was a binding covenant of blood and mutual defense. By preparing a meal for the hunted man, the host was making a public twe'disi, legal declaration to the men standing outside the tent. If you want to kill him, you have to kill me first. Look at the physical, sensory details David uses to paint this scene. The host does not just hand the fugitive a scrap of bread. He roasts meat. He fills a clay cup with wine until it literally spills over the rim and pools onto the woven rug. He takes thick, fragrant oil, often crushed olives mixed with costly spices, and pours it over the traveler's sun-baked, dusty hair. The smell of the perfume fills the air, masking the scent of the sweat and the fear from the canyon. And all of this is happening in the presence of my enemies. The wolves from the wadi, the hunters from the desert. They have not disappeared. They have tracked him to the edge of the camp. They are standing just past the firelight. You can see their eyes in the dark. You can hear them breathing, but they cannot take a single step forward. They are entirely paralyzed by the covenant of the host. We are a species desperate for comfort. When we hit a season of exhaustion, when the marriage gets hard, the table is not a polite dinner invitation. It is a fortress built out of food. The oil is not a cosmetic luxury. It is the physical seal of a sovereign protector. When you sit at this table, the threats in your life do not magically vanish. The medical report still exists. The financial ruin is still hovering at the edge of the camp. The enemies are permitted to watch you eat, but they are not permitted to touch you, because you are under the roof of a host, who is vastly more powerful than the things hunting you. The sheer relief of that protection changes how a human being views the rest of their life. And it leads David to the final, echoing conclusion of the song. A boy stares into a cracked, waterless wasteland and sees a field manual for survival. A shepherd chooses a deep, weathered rut in the dirt and stakes his name on bringing his flock home alive. A flock descends into a sheer, pitch-black ravine and discovers the only route to the high summer grass. A wolf lunges from the limestone shadows and meets the heavy, blunt force of an oak club. A fugitive collapses inside a woven tent and finds a host who builds a fortress out of roasted meat and overflowing wine. An enemy stalks to the very edge of when the future goes entirely dark. We want to bypass. We assume a loving God would simply airlift us out of the canyon, of the firelight, and is forced to stand completely paralyzed while the hunted man feasts. One ancient landscape, one untamed shepherd. But here's the part. I keep coming back to the sound of the wooden staff striking the canyon floor in the pitch black. Not the sunlight waiting on the high ridge. Not the fragrant oil poured on a dusty head at the table. The rhythmic, echoing tap of wood on limestone in the deepest part of the Psalmavet. Because the sheep do not need to understand the geography to survive. They do not need night vision. They only need to hear the man walking in front of them. If you are in a season where you cannot see the horizon, where the walls are closing in and a diagnosis or a collapse has plunged your life into darkness, stop looking for the bypass. The valley is not a sign of abandonment. You did not take a wrong turn. The darkness is the transit. The shepherd is entirely comfortable in the shadows, and his hands are full. He is not leading you to the grave. He is leading you to the table. And may the God, who knows every hidden, jagged rut in the wilderness, walk ahead, out of you in the dark, and bring you safely to a table where the things hunting you can only watch you eat. If this opened something up for you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels, we think a good shepherd keeps his flock out of the shadows. But David is writing from the wilderness, like they are walking through the valley right now. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And he is diagnosing something entirely different. He is capturing the sheer terror of moving through a space where you cannot see the horizon, where every shadow could hide a threat, and where your survival depends entirely on someone else's navigation. To find the answer, you have to start with the dirt. You have to step out of the neat English translations and into the harsh, unsentimental reality of ancient Middle Eastern shepherding. Because the valley is not a metaphor. He is not looking at rolling green hills. He is not watching a peaceful, grassy meadow. He is staring into a wasteland of cracked rock. The valley is a real place. And before we can understand what actually happens in the bottom of that canyon, we have to unlearn the version of this song we have been trained to sing. You have probably heard it read over a polished oak casket. Or maybe you have whispered it next to the cold metal rail of a hospital bed, listening to the rhythmic beep of a monitor. When the lights go down on a human life, this is the text we reach for. We treat Psalm 23 like a spiritual anesthetic. We use it to soften the brutal reality of death, reducing David's rugged field manual to a few comforting lines printed on a folded sympathy card. And it does bring comfort. It has anchored millions of people in their most terrifying moments, providing a floor when the bottom drops out of their world. But if you look closely at the text itself, a strange contradiction emerges. Look at the physical verbs David chooses. The flock is walking. A guest is eating a heavy, prepared meal at a table. A traveler is having his head anointed with thick, fragrant oil, feeling the weight of it run down his skin. His cup is physically overflowing with wine. Dead people do not eat feasts in the presence of their enemies. Steep ravines, and predators waiting in the dark. The air is dry enough to split your lips. To his left, jagged cliffs rise up. The 23rd Psalm is not a preparation for the grave. It is a choreography for living. We have turned the valley of the shadow of death into a metaphor for our final moments, because we have lost the ancient geography that birthed the poem. We live in a world of GPS and paved highways, so we assume a good shepherd would simply avoid the dangerous places. We assume that if we are following God, the path should be bathed in sunlight, the grass should always be green, and the water should always be still. If you are in a season of deep darkness, if your career is crumbling, or your health is failing, modern religion often implies you must have taken a wrong turn. We think the darkness means we are lost, but the shepherd knows something the sheep do not. To get a flock from the barren winter grazing lands to the fertile summer highlands, they cannot go over the mountains. The peaks are too steep. The limestone is too jagged for their hooves. To reach the high ground where the good grass actually grows, you have to travel directly through the deep, narrow ravines that cut through the mountain range. The dark valley is not a detour. It is the only route to the table. And before the shepherd even steps foot into those canyons, he has to make a highly specific, calculated choice about exactly which dirt path to take, casting long, black shadows that slice across the canyon floor. And in his hand, he holds a heavy wooden staff. Psalm chapter 23, verse 3. David writes a phrase we spiritualize immediately. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. We read that as a moral command. Keep your hands clean. Follow the rules. Be a good person. We assume God is telling us to behave. But the word translated as paths is highly specific. It is the Hebrew ma'agal. Ma'agal does not mean a broad highway. It does not mean a paved, flat road. It translates literally to an entrenchment, a rut, a wagon track. It is a deep, physical groove carved into the hard limestone by hundreds of hooves, walking the exact same line over decades. The writer of Proverbs uses the exact same word. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 26 says, "Ponder the path of your feet. Ponder the ma'agal. Look closely at the rut your feet are standing in." That single root word changes everything about the verse. The Judean wilderness is a maze of false trails. Wind cuts trails. Flash floods cut trails. Robbers cut trails. Wolves cut trails. If a sheep follows a rain wash, it falls off a cliff. If a sheep follows a predator's track, it walks straight into the teeth of a pack. The shepherd must locate the ma'aglei tzedek, the right tracks, the proven, reliable grooves. The path of righteousness here is not a moral purity test. This is the landscape of David. This is the terrain where a king learns how to rule. A boy leads sheep into the rocks. It is a navigational necessity. It is a track you can trust with your life when you cannot see over the next hill. And David adds a crucial detail. He leads me in these tracks for his name's sake. That is an ancient idiom for reputation. In the ancient Near East, a shepherd's entire identity was tied to his ability to bring the flock home alive. If he picks the wrong track, he loses the flock. If he chooses a false trail, the sheep die, and his name is ruined in the village. He has to know the terrain. He has to read the dirt. He has to place his feet perfectly inside the ma'agal, so the flock behind him can simply follow the sound of his staff hitting the rock. The sheep do not need a map. They do not need to understand the geography. They only need to stay in the rut the shepherd has chosen. But finding the right track is only the beginning of the journey. Because the safe path does not stay up on the sunlit ridge, the right track immediately drops down. The temperature drops. The sunlight disappears entirely behind towering rock walls. And the real test of the shepherd's reputation begins. The sun beats down on the Judean foothills. The winter grass is gone, chewed down to the bare, cracked earth. The shepherd knows they cannot stay. A warrior hides in caves from a monarch who wants him dead. A prophet walks 40 days into the same blinding heat. Summer is coming. The heat is rising. And if they remain in the lowlands, the flock will starve. He lifts his wooden staff, whistles sharply, and begins to move. They are heading for the high country. They are climbing toward the summer grazing lands where the morning dew still waters the grass. But between the dead plains and the high pastures are the wadis. These are the deep, sheer-sided ravines carved by centuries of violent flash floods. The flock enters the mouth of the gorge. Instantly, the temperature plummets. The blinding desert heat gives way to a sudden, damp chill you can feel on your arms. Walls of jagged limestone rise up hundreds of feet on either side, leaning inward, blocking out the sun completely. The sound of hundreds of hooves echoes off the narrow rock walls, a chaotic clattering that masks the sound of a leopard or a wolf waiting in the caves above. The sheep are terrified. They are prey animals, wired for wide-open spaces where they can see danger coming from a mile away. Their instinct is to scatter in the dark. Their heart rate spikes, but the shepherd does not stop. The darkness is not a sign of abandonment. It is the evidence of transit. Same desert, same brutal environment. Most people picture Psalm 23 like a watercolor painting hanging in a Sunday school classroom. He is taking them through the only route that actually reaches the high ground. He knows the valley is temporary. He knows the table is waiting at the top. If something about this ancient picture is naming a tension you have felt in your own life, the feeling that you are walking in the dark while trying to follow a good shepherd, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the shepherd keeps walking. He walks ahead of them, tapping his heavy staff against the stone so they can follow the rhythm in the pitch black. The sheep cannot see the destination. They cannot see over the next jagged boulder. They can only see the back of the shepherd's legs, and they can only hear the wood striking the rock. But this specific kind of canyon darkness is not just a geographical feature. In the ancient Hebrew mind, this ravine carries a specific, terrifying name. And the exact word David chooses to write on the parchment changes how you will read this entire poem for the rest of your life. Psalm chapter 23, verse 4. The flock is deep inside the canyon. The rock walls blocking out the sky. Gentle streams. Lush European pastures. A peaceful afternoon nap. We read the Valley of the Shadow of Death, and we immediately think of a hospital room. And David writes the most famous phrase in the English Bible. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. We read that phrase and immediately picture the end of a life. But the phrase shadow of death is translated from a single, highly specific Hebrew word. It is the word salmavet. It is a compound noun, combining tzl, meaning shadow, and mavet, meaning death. But ancient linguists and Hebrew scholars recognize this word not as a literal reference to the dying process, but as a poetic idiom for absolute, impenetrable gloom. It appears 18 times in the Old Testament, predominantly in the book of Job and the Psalms, and it describes a darkness so thick you can feel the weight of it on your skin. The prophet Jeremiah uses this exact word in chapter 2, verse 6. When recounting the brutal Exodus history, he describes the wilderness God led Israel through as a land of deserts and pits, a land of drought and salmavet. Jeremiah was not talking about the afterlife. He was talking about a physical, terrifying geography where survival seemed impossible. That etymology changes everything about how we read this text in our own moments of panic. We think of a funeral home. We assume the text is talking about the final breath of a human life. When David uses salmavet, he is not giving you a manual for how to die gracefully. He is giving you a manual for how to endure pitch-black uncertainty while you are still breathing. The valley is not a metaphor for a casket. It is a description of a space where you are entirely blind. It is the medical diagnosis that offers no clear prognosis. It is the collapse of a business you spent a decade building. It is the season where you wake up every morning and realize you cannot see an inch past your own boots. You are in the salmavet. But here is what most people miss when they read this verse in the dark. The sheep are blind in the canyon, surrounded by predators, but they do not panic. Because the detail that determines whether you survive the valley is not the amount of light you have. but what the shepherd is holding in his hands. He holds a rod and a staff. 2 pieces of wood. 2 entirely different tools. The rod is a club, a heavy piece of oak, a weapon carved with a thick knob at the end, often embedded with pieces of iron or sharp flint. The shepherd wears it on his belt.